Most ghost stories start with fear, with terror that grips your soul and makes you question every shadow in the room. But our story is different. Ours begins with love. A pure, intense, and eternal love. A love that defies the laws of nature and transcends the barrier between life and death. When she died, I thought I had lost everything. I thought the love we had built over years would fade away like smoke in the wind. But I was completely wrong. What I discovered was something that would change my understanding of love forever. In life, our love was limited by the distractions of the world, by trivial fights, by day-to-day stress. It was tainted by routine, by unspoken words, by lost opportunities to say, "I love you," one more time. But in death, that love was purified. It became something more powerful, more real than it had ever been when she was breathing beside me. It was a love without barriers, without misunderstandings, without wasted time. It was the very essence of what we had built together, distilled to its most perfect form. Because true love knows no limits. It doesn't understand life or death. It transcends everything we think we know about reality. This is the story of Anna, a brilliant and ambitious medical student who arrived at an abandoned hospital with a single purpose: to advance her professional career. She had heard rumors about the medical files that lay in that place forgotten by time, documents that could be the key to her doctoral thesis. San Miguel Hospital had closed its doors decades ago, but its corridors still held secrets. Secrets that Anna was determined to discover, regardless of her professor's warnings or her family's pleas for her not to go alone. But what Anna didn't expect to find within those walls covered in dust and abandonment weren't just medical records. They weren't just fascinating clinical cases that could catapult her academic career. What she found was a man. A doctor named Daniel. Daniel was different from anyone she had ever met. His eyes held an ancient depth, as if they had witnessed centuries of suffering and healing. His hands, soft yet firm, seemed to know every secret of the human body. And when he spoke about medicine, he did so with a passion that ignited something deep in Anna's heart. They fell in love with an intensity that frightened her. It was a love that consumed every thought, every heartbeat. A love that made her feel more alive than she had ever been. But their love held a secret so dark, so dangerous, that it had the power to destroy her completely. A secret that could cost her not only her career, not only her future, but her very life. At first, Anna thought she was losing her mind. The first weeks in the abandoned hospital were a whirlwind of inexplicable encounters that left her questioning her own sanity. She had come seeking medical knowledge, but found herself face to face with something that defied all scientific logic. The other students who occasionally visited the place spoke of malignant presences, of dark energies that inhabited those deteriorated walls. They warned her about the vengeful spirits of patients who had died under terrible circumstances, about doctors who had lost their minds and now wandered eternally through the corridors. But Anna soon realized something that completely changed her perspective. Daniel wasn't an evil spirit thirsting for revenge. He wasn't one of those entities that seek to harm the living out of pure resentment or malice. Daniel was lost. Deeply, desperately lost. He was like a soul in torment trapped between two worlds, unable to move forward into the light but also incapable of completely returning to life. An essential part of his existence had been violently and unexpectedly torn from him. His identity, his memories, perhaps even his purpose in life, everything had been fragmented and scattered like leaves in the wind. Daniel had no voice in the traditional sense. His lips couldn't form audible words, his vocal cords couldn't vibrate to create sounds. But he found extraordinary ways to communicate with Anna, ways that demonstrated the desperate creativity of a soul that needed to be heard. He wrote messages with the dust accumulated on rusted desks, tracing trembling letters that appeared as if by magic when Anna wasn't looking. His words materialized on the dusty surfaces of operating tables, on the frames of broken windows, on any surface that could retain the trace of his ethereal presence. He also manifested through brief reflections in the shattered mirrors that hung crooked from the walls. For a fraction of a second, Anna could see his complete face, his eyes filled with infinite sadness, his lips moving silently trying to say something crucial that she needed to hear. It was fragmented communication, like trying to assemble a puzzle with half the pieces missing. But Anna learned to read those signs, to interpret each dusty message, each fleeting reflection, as if it were a secret code between two lovers separated by the cruelest barrier of all, death itself. There was something magnetically beautiful about Daniel's presence that Anna could never fully explain. Every time he was near, a unique sensation enveloped her like an invisible embrace. It was a comforting chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. It wasn't the sharp, unpleasant cold that makes you shiver and seek shelter. It wasn't the frigidity that chills you to the bone and makes you feel vulnerable. This cold was different. It was like being touched by the gentlest breeze of a spring morning, like feeling a lover's fingers caressing your skin with the delicacy of a feather. Anna learned to recognize that sensation before Daniel manifested completely. It was his way of announcing his arrival, his way of telling her, "I'm here with you." When that comforting chill surrounded her, she knew she wasn't alone in those abandoned corridors. She knew Daniel had come to accompany her, to protect her, to love her in the only way he could. Their love blossomed in the most improbable places. In the absolute silence of an operating room that hadn't seen life in decades. In the solitude of early mornings when Anna stayed studying under the dim light of her flashlight. In the quietest moments, when the outside world seemed to have forgotten this place had ever existed. It was a love nourished by whispers written in dust and stolen glances in broken mirrors. A love that grew with each message he left for her, with each reflection they shared, with each moment she felt that reassuring presence enveloping her heart. But as their affection deepened, as Anna fell more hopelessly in love with this ethereal being who had captured her soul, one question began to obsess her. A question that seemed to be the key to everything, the final piece of the puzzle that kept Daniel trapped between worlds. How had Daniel truly died in 1958? It wasn't simple academic curiosity. Anna could feel that this question was what kept him chained to this place, what prevented him from finding eternal peace. It was like an open wound in his soul that couldn't heal until the truth was revealed. The hospital's official records were scarce and contradictory. Some documents mentioned an accident during surgery. Others suggested a sudden collapse during his night shift. There were even whispered rumors that his death had been something more sinister, something the authorities of that era had decided to bury along with him. But Anna knew, with that certainty that only true love can provide, that until she discovered the complete truth about how he had lost his life, Daniel would never be able to rest. And if Daniel couldn't rest, their love would remain forever trapped in those ghostly corridors, beautiful but incomplete, eternal but tormented. The question became her obsession, her mission, the only way to save both the man she loved and her own soul, which every day became more deeply entangled with his. Anna had spent weeks searching through dusty files, yellowed medical records, and forgotten documents in the deepest basements of the hospital. Her fingers were stained with ancient ink and her eyes burned from long nights of research under the dim light of candles she had brought with her. But finally, in a sealed box that had remained untouched for decades, she found what she had been searching for. The original records from 1958. The documents that someone had tried to hide, but that time and neglect had preserved as silent evidence of a terrible injustice. The truth was more devastating than Anna had imagined. Daniel hadn't died from a fortuitous medical accident. It hadn't been a twist of fate or an understandable human error. His death had been the result of a calculated, cold, and ruthless betrayal. In the files, Anna discovered the complete story. Daniel had been one of the hospital's most brilliant surgeons, respected by his colleagues and adored by his patients. But that very brilliance had awakened a poisonous envy in the heart of another doctor, Dr. Marcus Webb. Webb had spent years in Daniel's shadow, watching as the promotions he believed he deserved went to his younger colleagues' hands. He had observed with growing bitterness how the most important cases, the most prestigious recognitions, always ended up being Daniel's. On the night of October 15, 1958, Webb made a decision that would change the course of history. He deliberately sabotaged the anesthesia equipment that Daniel would use in a critical emergency surgery. He altered the valves, manipulated the gauges, created a deadly trap disguised as a medical accident. Daniel died that night, not from his own failure, but from the malice of someone he had considered a trusted colleague. He died without knowing he had been betrayed, without being able to defend himself, without having the opportunity to expose the truth. Anna held those documents in her trembling hands and felt the weight of overwhelming responsibility. She had in her power the evidence that could clear Daniel's name, that could give him the justice he had been seeking for more than 6 decades. But she also knew, with painful clarity that pierced her heart like a dagger, that exposing that truth would have a cost that would destroy her completely. If she revealed what she had discovered, if she made public the betrayal that had led to Daniel's death, he would finally find the peace his soul had been seeking. The invisible chains that kept him bound to this world would break. His tormented spirit could rest at last. But that meant Daniel would be gone forever. No more messages written in dust. No more stolen reflections in broken mirrors. No more that comforting presence that had filled the void in her heart. No more impossible but real love that had transformed her life in ways she never thought possible. Anna faced the cruelest decision that love can demand: to save the beloved knowing it meant losing him forever, or keep him close while condemning him to an eternity of suffering. The most difficult decision of her life crystallized in a moment of painful clarity that Anna would never forget. Sitting on the cold floor of the hospital's main office, with documents scattered around her like evidence of a truth that had remained hidden for decades, Anna understood what she had to do. True love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes, the deepest act of love is having the courage to let go. Anna knew that keeping Daniel bound to this world for her own selfishness would be the cruelest form of love. It would be condemning him to an eternal existence of incompleteness, of longings that could never be satisfied, of a love that could never be fully consummated. It would be choosing her own temporary happiness over his eternal peace. So she chose duty. She chose to do what was right, even though it would cost her heart. With trembling but determined hands, Anna compiled all the evidence she had found. She organized the documents that proved Webb's betrayal, the letters that revealed his jealousy, the reports that had been altered to hide the truth. She prepared a complete dossier that would exonerate Daniel and expose the injustice that had remained buried for more than 60 years. But before making her discovery public, she needed to say goodbye. Anna returned to the hospital one last night, carrying with her the heavy burden of knowledge that would change everything. The corridors had never seemed quieter to her, more filled with echoes of a past that was about to be resolved forever. When she felt that familiar comforting presence envelop her, when that gentle cold touched her like a final caress, Anna couldn't contain the tears that had been building for days. "I know," she whispered to the air, knowing he could hear her even though he couldn't respond with words. "I know what happened. I know the truth." The air around her seemed to vibrate with intense emotion. It was as if Daniel had been waiting for this moment for decades, as if finally someone had come to give him the validation and justice his soul needed. Anna told him everything she had discovered, every detail of the betrayal, every piece of evidence that would prove his innocence. And as she spoke, she could feel something changing in the atmosphere, as if the invisible chains that had kept Daniel prisoner were beginning to loosen. "I'm going to make everyone know the truth," she promised him, her voice broken with emotion. "Your name will be cleared. People will know you were a victim, not the one responsible. But that means..." She couldn't finish the sentence. The words stuck in her throat because the reality was too painful to verbalize. It was then that Daniel manifested for the last time with a clarity that Anna had never experienced before. It wasn't a fleeting reflection in a broken mirror or a dusty message on a desk. This time, his entire form materialized before her, translucent but completely visible. He was more beautiful than she had imagined. His eyes had that same ancient depth she had felt from the beginning, but now they also shone with something new: gratitude, incipient peace, and a love so pure it left her breathless. Daniel approached her slowly, and although Anna knew he couldn't touch her physically, she felt his presence more intensely than ever. He raised his ethereal hand toward a window fogged by the night's humidity, and with a finger that barely seemed real, began to write on the moist glass. The letters appeared one by one, each stroke deliberate and full of meaning. "Love is stronger than time." Anna read the words over and over, memorizing every curve of every letter, knowing it would be the last thing Daniel would give her. It was his final message, his legacy, his promise that what they had shared transcended all physical and temporal limitations. As the words remained on the fogged glass, Anna felt Daniel's presence beginning to fade. It wasn't sudden, but gradual, like a melody slowly fading until it becomes silence. "I love you," Anna whispered, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. "I will always love you." And then, with a gentleness that was both heartbreaking and beautiful, Daniel faded forever. But the words on the glass remained as testimony to a love that had conquered death itself, to a connection that no barrier could completely destroy. Love is stronger than time. And Anna knew that, although Daniel had found his peace, what they had shared would live forever in her heart. Anna did the right thing, although the weight of that decision would accompany her for the rest of her life. In the days that followed Daniel's disappearance, she felt as if she had lost an essential part of herself. She had experienced the purest and most transcendent love she ever believed possible, only to have to renounce it for the good of the soul she loved. The revelation of the truth about Daniel's death caused a significant impact in the medical community. The documents Anna had discovered were presented to the corresponding authorities, and the story of Dr. Marcus Webb's betrayal became a case study on medical ethics and the devastating consequences of professional envy. Daniel's name was completely exonerated. Medical records were corrected to reflect the truth, that he had been a victim of deliberate sabotage, not responsible for a fatal medical error. His legacy was restored, and his memory was honored as that of a brilliant and dedicated doctor who had paid the ultimate price for another's malice. With the truth finally revealed, the abandoned hospital lost that unsettling energy that had characterized it for decades. The corridors no longer resonated with inexplicable echoes, windows no longer fogged mysteriously, and that sensation of supernatural presence completely faded. It was as if the building had exhaled for the first time in more than 60 years. Daniel had found his peace, and with it, the hospital was truly silenced. Anna immersed herself in her studies with renewed determination. The pain of loss transformed into deep motivation to honor Daniel's memory by becoming the best doctor she could be. Every patient she saved, every life she touched, was a way to continue the legacy of compassion and medical excellence that Daniel had represented. Years passed, and Anna graduated with honors, specializing in cardiovascular surgery. Her dedication and skill quickly made her one of the most respected surgeons at General Hospital. Her colleagues admired not only her technical prowess, but also the emotional depth with which she treated each patient, as if she understood firsthand the precious and fragile value of human life. But despite her professional success, Anna carried within herself an empty space that no achievement could fill. She had had some relationships over the years, good and decent men who admired and courted her sincerely. However, none of those connections could compare to the intensity and purity of what she had experienced with Daniel. It was as if her heart had been calibrated to a specific frequency of love, and nothing else could resonate in the same way. 6 years after that farewell night, Anna had become an experienced and mature doctor. At 32 years old, she was head of the cardiovascular surgery department, respected by her peers and adored by her patients. She had saved countless lives, had mentored dozens of young doctors, and had contributed significantly to the advancement of her medical field. It was a particularly quiet Friday night at the hospital. Anna had finished her last surgery of the day, a complex coronary bypass operation that had lasted almost 6 hours. The patient, a 60-year-old man with a loving family waiting for news, had left the operating room in stable condition, and Anna felt that deep satisfaction that only comes after saving a life. She was closing out her final shift of the week, organizing medical files in her office and preparing for a much-needed weekend of rest. She had simple but comforting plans: a quiet dinner at her apartment, maybe a movie, and the possibility of sleeping in on Saturday for the first time in weeks. As she reviewed the last medical reports and signed pending orders, Anna reflected on how far she had come since those days as a medical student exploring an abandoned hospital. Sometimes she wondered if all of that had been real, if she had truly experienced that supernatural love, or if it had been a product of the stress and loneliness of her student years. But then she remembered with perfect clarity the sensation of that comforting chill, the words written in dust, the reflections in broken mirrors, and especially that final message on the fogged glass: "Love is stronger than time." She knew with absolute certainty that it had been real, that she had loved and been loved in a way that transcended all conventional understanding. Anna had finished her shift and was walking through the hospital corridors when a young intern gently intercepted her near the nurse's station. At first she didn't pay much attention. It was common for residents to approach her with questions. But there was something different about this encounter. The young man approached with a curious but strangely familiar smile, as if he had been specifically waiting for her. "Excuse me, Dr. Rodriguez," he said with a voice that immediately captured her attention. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" When their eyes met, Anna felt as if she had received an electric shock. That familiar chill, that comforting sensation she hadn't experienced in 6 years, enveloped her again with breathtaking intensity. The young man was approximately 28 years old, with wavy brown hair and an athletic build. But it was his eyes that impacted her like lightning, a deep, intense blue, exactly the same shade she vividly remembered from Daniel. It wasn't just the color that disturbed her, it was the depth they seemed to contain, as if they had seen much more than corresponded to someone his age. There was recognition in them, as if they had known her long before this moment. "Are you all right, doctor?" he asked with sincere concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Sorry," she managed to articulate. "It's just that you remind me of someone." The young man smiled, completely illuminating his face. "That's interesting, because since I arrived at this hospital I've had the strangest feeling, like I was looking for someone specific. And when I saw you, I knew I had to speak with you." "What's your name?" Anna asked with a trembling voice. "Dr. Daniel Hernandez," he responded naturally. "I just started my rotation in cardiovascular surgery." The name hit her like lightning. Daniel. Of course his name was Daniel. Anna studied his face, looking for signs. Physically he didn't resemble the Daniel she had known, but there was something deeper, something in this person's essence that resonated with a familiar frequency. Was this Daniel a second chance from destiny? Or simply a cruel coincidence? What she knew for certain was that she felt more alive than she had in 6 years. And those blue eyes that seemed to know all her secrets told her this story was far from over. Was it really a coincidence that Anna found another Daniel, with those same deep blue eyes that seemed to know the secrets of her soul? Or are there forces in the universe that go beyond our understanding, forces that can bring back true love even after death? Some will say it's impossible, that the dead don't return, that love cannot transcend the barriers between life and death. But others firmly believe that authentic love is the most powerful force in the universe, capable of overcoming any obstacle, even death itself. Anna now found herself facing the most extraordinary possibility of her life, that the love she had lost had found a way to return to her. That Daniel, in some inexplicable way, had come back to give them a second chance to live the love that was taken from them. What would you do in her place? Would you have the courage to risk believing in the impossible? Or the prudence to protect your heart from possible devastating disappointment? Anna and Daniel's story reminds us that true love never dies completely, that there are connections so deep between souls that they transcend time, space, and even death, and that sometimes, when we least expect it, the universe gives us a second chance to find the happiness we thought was lost forever. If this story of love that transcended beyond death touched your heart, like this video and subscribe to Love from the Beyond for more incredible stories of love and mystery that defy all explanation. And let me know in the comments, do you think that was really Daniel returning in a new life, or just a cruel coincidence of fate?